Miranda Vale wasn't born wicked. Cresswell made her that way, one betrayal at a time, until the woman they called a witch learned how to turn vengeance into an art no one could escape. In the small mountain town of Cresswell, nothing ever truly changed. It was a quiet place wrapped in fog, surrounded by pine forests, and filled with people who knew every rumor before it finished being spoken. Life moved in predictable circles: church on Sundays, gossip at the diner, and festivals that celebrated a past no one could remember clearly. But that calm rhythm broke the day Miranda Vale arrived. She came in a silver sedan with no license plate, wearing a long black coat that brushed against her ankles. Her new home was Thornwood Estate, a decaying mansion that had stood abandoned for over 30 years, its windows boarded and its gates rusted shut. When the locals saw lights flickering there again, the town began to hum with curiosity and unease. Miranda was polite when she spoke, though her voice carried a tone that unsettled people, too calm, too precise. She paid for everything in cash, declined all invitations, and never explained why she had chosen Cresswell of all places. Those who lived nearby swore she wandered the woods at night, collecting strange herbs, her lantern casting long shadows between the trees. Children whispered that they saw her talking to the stray cats that gathered near her porch. Adults laughed off the stories but still crossed the street when passing the estate. Strange things began happening within weeks. The Jenkins family woke to find every mirror in their house shattered. A farmer's field of corn, once healthy, rotted overnight despite clear weather. Pets went missing, dogs, cats, even birds from cages, and people began to notice strange symbols carved into fence posts and tree trunks. The sheriff chalked it up to pranksters, but whispers of witchcraft started spreading faster than reason. The name Miranda Vale became a warning, spoken only in low voices. Yet, despite the growing fear, no one could accuse her of anything. She never appeared angry or frightened. She carried herself with the calm confidence of someone who knew she couldn't be touched. She often stood on her balcony in the evenings, watching the sun fall behind the hills, her figure outlined in gold. Sometimes she smiled, a small, knowing curve of her lips that made people turn away. One night, the town's power flickered out during a thunderstorm. When the lights returned, every house in Cresswell found a small white feather on its doorstep. The next morning, a local reporter went up to Thornwood Estate to ask if Miranda had seen anything strange. The gate was locked, but she was visible through the window, sitting in a chair near the fireplace, unmoving, staring into the flames. When he called her name, she didn't turn her head. Later, he claimed he saw shadows moving along the walls behind her, shapes that didn't match the firelight. After that night, the rumors hardened into certainty. People began calling her the Witch of Thornwood. Some said she was cursed, others believed she was punishing the town for something forgotten long ago, but no one dared to confront her. In Cresswell, silence became safety, and the witch's name was something best left unspoken. The first real tragedy that shattered Cresswell's fragile calm came in the chill of October. The Harrow family, one of the wealthiest in town, had returned from a trip abroad and decided to celebrate their homecoming with a lavish dinner party at their lakeside mansion. Candles glowed in every window, music drifted through the night air, and cars lined the narrow road leading up to the property. People said the laughter could be heard across the water, but by dawn, the laughter was gone, replaced by the crackle of flames and the stench of smoke. The Harrow estate was nothing but blackened rubble, and no one inside survived. The fire department worked through the night, yet the cause baffled them. There were no signs of accelerants, no electrical faults, and no lightning in the area. Everything burned too fast, too completely. When investigators sifted through the ashes, they found only fragments of metal, melted glass, and one strange item near the center of the ruins, a silver locket, scorched but still intact. Inside it was a photograph of Miranda Vale, younger, smiling beside a man who was later identified as Edward Harrow, the very patriarch who had perished in the blaze. The discovery hit the town like a lightning strike. Theories flew in every direction. Some said Miranda and Edward had been lovers. Others believed she had cursed him for betraying her. The sheriff's office questioned her, but Miranda claimed no connection to the family and insisted she had never met Edward Harrow. She provided no alibi, only a calm stare and steady voice that unsettled the officers more than any confession could. Witnesses, however, placed her car near the lake that same evening, parked just beyond the tree line. Still, without solid evidence, she walked free. After the fire, Thornwood Estate seemed to grow darker. The lights that once flickered in its windows now glowed all night, and strange humming noises were reported from the woods nearby. Some claimed they saw faint red light pulsing from the mansion's attic, as if from candles burning behind shuttered windows. A few brave souls who passed too close swore they heard whispers carried on the wind, soft, rhythmic, like a chant. The townspeople started avoiding the lake entirely, convinced the place had become cursed. The mayor tried to calm the growing panic, but even he couldn't explain the sudden wave of misfortune that followed. 3 local businesses mysteriously burned down within 2 weeks, and a farmer's livestock were found dead in their stalls, untouched by predators. Every incident seemed to happen after someone publicly mentioned Miranda's name. It became an unspoken rule not to talk about her at all. Still, the connection between her and the Harrow family couldn't be ignored. When an old photograph surfaced in the local newspaper archives showing Edward Harrow attending a business conference years earlier, Miranda was standing behind him, unnamed but unmistakable. That image changed everything. Whatever she claimed, the past tied her to the Harrows in a way no one could deny. From that moment on, the town no longer questioned whether Miranda Vale had secrets. They wondered how many more she was still hiding. The months that followed the Harrow fire dragged Cresswell into a state of quiet dread. People went about their routines, but every smile felt strained, every conversation clipped short. The air itself seemed heavier, the streets emptier after dusk. Miranda Vale was rarely seen, yet her presence lingered everywhere, on the lips of those too afraid to say her name, and in the sleepless thoughts of those who tried to forget. It began again with the letters. Small ivory envelopes started appearing on doorsteps across town, each sealed with a black wax emblem shaped like a crescent moon. Inside, a single handwritten line in flawless script read the same for everyone. Balance always returns to those who break it. No one understood the meaning, but most who received the letters shared one thing in common. They were among the wealthiest in Cresswell. Within weeks, tragedy struck again. One morning, Claire Beecham, owner of the town's largest real estate company, was found dead in her bathtub. The water was still warm, but her body showed no signs of struggle, no bruises, no toxins. The death was ruled undetermined, but locals whispered that the witch had claimed her first. A few days later, Arthur Mendez, who ran the bank, collapsed on his front porch with his morning coffee, perfectly healthy the day before. His autopsy revealed no cause of death. Panic took root. People began locking their doors during daylight, drawing curtains even when the sun shone bright. Then came the chessboard. It was discovered on the desk of an attorney named Walter King, the next to die. The board was arranged mid-game, all white pieces gone except for a single black queen standing alone at the center. The investigators saw it as meaningless coincidence. But the people of Cresswell didn't. They began connecting the dots, the letters, the deaths, and the silent pattern tying them together. An old town archivist unearthed records linking every victim to a failed business venture from nearly a decade earlier. Vale Industries, a small research firm once owned by Miranda and her late husband, Edward. The company had collapsed after a ruthless corporate takeover led by those same investors who were now dying one by one. The revelations spread like wildfire. The whispers turned into fear-soaked certainty. What if Miranda hadn't just come to Cresswell for isolation? What if she had come to finish something that started years ago? The police reopened their investigation, combing through old business records, but many documents were missing. A former employee who had worked for the Harrows admitted anonymously that Edward S. death had ruined Miranda, leaving her bankrupt and humiliated. Now, with each of those who had profited from her downfall meeting inexplicable ends, it seemed her vengeance was unfolding like a carefully planned ritual. At night, the wind that swept through the pine trees carried strange sounds, soft laughter, faint music, the rustling of paper. Thornwood Estate glowed with light again, its windows alive with shifting shadows. Some said they saw her silhouette moving through the rooms, pausing by the window as if counting unseen victims. The sheriff doubled patrols, but fear was stronger than law. Cresswell had become her chessboard, and one by one the pieces were falling exactly where she wanted them. The investigation into Miranda Vale reached a breaking point when the local police, armed with a long-delayed warrant, finally entered Thornwood Estate. The mansion loomed over them like a monument to secrets, its doors swollen from years of damp, the air thick with the scent of burnt wood and something faintly metallic. Inside, the house was immaculate, far too clean for a place so old. Dust should have blanketed the furniture, but every surface gleamed as though someone had polished it just that morning. The walls were lined with antique portraits, each depicting women who looked uncannily alike, all bearing Miranda's sharp features and pale, steady eyes. The officers paused before each one, uneasy, their flashlights trembling slightly, as if the painted eyes were following them through the halls. They reached a locked room on the second floor, its door sealed with iron bolts. When it was finally forced open, the true nature of Thornwood Estate revealed itself. The room was a shrine of order and obsession. One entire wall was covered in maps of Cresswell, marked with red pins and looping lines of string. Another was filled with photographs, articles, and handwritten notes. Each picture bore a name that matched the victims, and beside each, a single word scrawled in red ink: paid. The opposite wall displayed a massive chalkboard covered in calculations and symbols no one recognized. At its center stood a small table holding a single chessboard, the Black Queen positioned in the middle, the other pieces arranged in a frozen state of play. But it was what lay beneath the floorboards that unsettled them most. Hidden under a trapdoor was a safe containing multiple passports, each bearing different names and dates, yet all with the same face, Miranda's. Some were decades old, others recent, stamped with locations across continents. Alongside them were faded photographs of towns that had suffered mysterious fires, unexplained disappearances, and unsolved deaths eerily similar to what had happened in Cresswell. Each event occurred years apart, but the pattern was unmistakable. Every place had its own Miranda Vale, always arriving quietly, always leaving just before disaster struck. Forensic specialists analyzed fingerprints from the house, only to uncover something impossible. The prints on the passports and photographs matched not only Miranda's current identity, but also women who had lived more than 50 years ago. Public records confirmed their existence, but all had died under suspicious circumstances. It was as if Miranda had stepped from one lifetime into another, carrying her name and vengeance forward like an unbroken chain. News of the discovery spread through Cresswell like a fever. Reporters flooded the town, historians searched archives, and frightened locals locked their doors before sunset. Some claimed Miranda had mastered a kind of dark science, preserving herself beyond the limits of age. Others swore she wasn't human at all, that she was something older wearing a human face. Police surveillance around Thornwood increased, but she was never seen leaving or entering. Her lights burned at night, flickering faintly through the curtains like watchful eyes. The more investigators searched, the less they understood and the deeper the mystery grew. What they had uncovered was no longer a case of revenge. It was a story that seemed to stretch beyond time itself. When police returned to Thornwood Estate the following week to arrest Miranda Vale, the mansion stood silent beneath a heavy blanket of fog. The front gate hung open, creaking softly in the wind. Inside, every trace of her life had vanished. The bookshelves were empty, the walls bare, and the air thick with the faint scent of smoke and lavender. The grand piano in the parlor was missing its keys, the strings cut cleanly as if by a careful hand. Upstairs, her bedroom was stripped of everything but a single chair by the window, facing the forest beyond. On the table beside it lay an open chessboard frozen mid-game, the black queen standing in check, a folded note beside it, written in her distinct, elegant handwriting. It read only 4 words. Checkmate isn't the end. The discovery sent a ripple of unease through everyone who entered. There was no sign of forced exit, no footprints in the dust, no vehicle tracks on the muddy road leading away from the estate. Even the neighbors swore they hadn't seen her in days. The house seemed to have swallowed her whole. Forensics combed every inch, yet found nothing. No DNA, no personal effects, no trace of recent movement. It was as though Miranda Vale had evaporated into the air she once haunted. In the weeks that followed, the case spiraled into obsession. Detectives cross-checked sightings, followed anonymous tips, and traced the identities from her safe. Each led to towns with their own unsolved tragedies, each ending with a woman fitting Miranda's description disappearing just before the authorities closed in. She left behind similar calling cards, symbols carved into walls, chessboards mid-match, and letters referencing balance. What seemed like revenge now looked like ritual, a pattern woven through decades and continents, always targeting those who had profited from the suffering of others. Yet when a customer accidentally knocked over a display of chess pieces, she smiled faintly and whispered that the queen was always her favorite. Back in Cresswell, Thornwood Estate was eventually sold at auction, but no buyer ever stayed for long. Tenants reported hearing footsteps in the halls, mirrors fogging over with handprints, and faint music drifting through the rooms late at night. The local police sealed the property after a series of break-ins, though nothing was ever taken, only rearranged, as if someone had been returning to move the pieces of a game still being played. Over time, the story of Miranda Vale turned into legend. Some said she had been a genius of manipulation, orchestrating her vengeance through fear. Others believed she had transcended death itself, her mind too sharp to be confined by time. Whatever truth remained was buried beneath the silence of Thornwood, where the echo of her final note still lingered. A quiet reminder that every game, no matter how carefully played, always leaves one piece on the board.